How's it going, everybody? My name is Peyton Longclaw, and welcome to Frame by Frame. You may know him by Brandon Foster, a little Jason. Today, David Lambert is coming out to talk with me about everything from acting to writing to storytelling. Welcome, David. I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you, man. I'm glad to be here and to talk with you today.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. I'm super excited to get into this. I mean, it's been a long time coming. It's a good thing to have you here. So,
Yeah.
so what's life been like for you lately, man? I know you do a lot of acting classes, a lot, like like a
Yeah.
good bit of classes. How's that
Yeah,
going?
man. Yeah, I've been focused on classes, I guess more externally and more like regularly. And I've been lucky to, I've been grateful that there's been like quite the turnout with that, and it's been really great. I hadn't done anything like one-on-ones before. I've done like workshops with like co-teaching online workshops. That's kind of how it started, like closer to COVID. So like 2020, maybe more like 2021.
Mhm.
Um, so I did a few workshops here and there, but they were kind of one-offs, and we would have people sign up online, and then it would be like an hour, like a all day kind of workshop. And so I learned kind of my footing of how to like even go about doing an online thing there. And then yeah, man, just like later I had the time. Um, I moved and my setup kind of got comfier and more peaceful for me, and I just had the time, like I audition and stuff on the side, and I do other things on the side, but I was really interested in giving the one-on-one coaching sessions a shot, because that was sort of, I didn't do them online, but coming up I had a few coaches that I would go to regularly,
Mhm.
in various chapters of my come up, or whatever you want to call that. But they were probably the ones that I learned the most from. I went to studio class too, like group class, but one-on-one coachings were always my favorite, and I felt like I always took the most from them. They were, I would always go in for like hour and a half, hour, 2 hours, somewhere in there, um, and just really intensely work with someone who's, an experienced actor, basically. So long story short, after I've done what I've done so far in my career, I felt like I had, enough to kind of turn around and share with others. And so one-on-ones kind of finally made sense to me to do and offer. And yeah, I've been doing that now ever since, and I'm gonna keep doing it as long as I have the time, really. As long as I feel like I can schedule people and give them a deserving amount of my time and my attention, and if I don't feel like I'm doing too much, then I'm definitely going to continue to do this. It's been great, man. It's been great.
I'm glad to hear. You are. I speaking from a student perspective, you're an amazing teacher.
Thank
It's also super refreshing to see that you're coming out here and you're not charging an arm and a leg to teach. Anybody. It's I think it's $100 an hour or $100 for 2 hours,
you. Yep.
and anybody, not anybody, but most people can afford that if they're looking in the range. I've seen acting teachers who are half as experienced as you charging $1,000 a month.
Yeah.
And I just
Yeah.
want to commend you for that. That's a really good thing that you're doing, and I want to encourage anybody who's watching to go check that out because it's definitely worth it.
Thank you, man. Thank you for saying that. You're a great student. I love working with you. And this is another reason why I wanted to do this, is to open myself up to all the fantastic talent out there, and all of the great people who want to get involved, whether they're beginners and I work with people who aren't even really interested in acting. They just want to get better with public speaking, or they want to, kind of learn skills or be exposed to things that they otherwise wouldn't be, and so the pricing and kind of even the format and everything about it, I want it to be approachable, I want it to be accessible, all of those things, because again, like, I was a student coming up, I was a young theater kid who wanted to be eventually on camera. I went to a bunch of coaches and stuff, and I remember certain people feeling kind of like hard to get to, you know,
Mhm.
and I don't want that. I don't think that needs to happen, and I think it's a bit of cutting the middleman out as well. Um, and that's why online is great too, because the reach, and I can, I talk to people online, I schedule it with them. There's no other person involved, and then we go all the way through to sessions. And I think there's no need to complicate it. So, you know,
Perfect.
but anyone out there, anyone who watches this, and if they are interested in trying a class, and just exploring what a scene is or what it can be, or
Mhm.
exploring what a character can be, I think the way I do it is very easy to grasp, and I try to make it very, very casual and grounded, and it's nothing crazy, and it's very I try to just keep it intimate between us, So if anyone out there who watches this wants to explore that, or if you're already an actor and you're already well on your journey, I'd love to, come alongside you and maybe help you a little bit, show you a thing or two, you know.
Oh yeah. And when you before you mentioned, you had some people that you looked up to, some people. Who are some of those people that, like, when you think of, like, let's take it back to a young David Lambert. Let's talk about before the Fosters, before the lifeguard. Who did you look up to? Who was that person that you looked at and you're like, I want to be that. I want to be an actor. I want to be a musician. I want to be.
Yeah, yeah, totally. That's a really great question. It's a great question because like it sort of changed over time, I guess, to a degree. But then there are certain people where it didn't change. So I did theater coming up, um, but really, like, even while I was doing theater, I really loved movies, and I
Yeah.
loved, I had a bunch of DVDs. Before that, my family had a bunch of VHSs. I went to the theater a lot growing up. I usually lived in the suburbs, so like theaters were a regular thing for us to do. There was always a theater at the mall, or there was a theater, somewhere nearby, and so that was like a very common thing. And I had a TV I was one of those kids who were lucky enough to have a TV in my room, so I watched movies in my bedroom too. And I think even when I was a theater kid, and I've thought about this like not that long ago too, but like even as a theater kid, like what I really loved was stories
Mm.
and immersion into stories, and so um my heroes were kind of people that, for me, I thought of them as like people who did what I wanted to do, who were playing in other worlds, and these were just the actors. These were the actors I grew up with. I loved like the epic dramas, the historical epics of like the early 2000s. Like well, Lord of the Rings is the one I got to mention first, but like Gladiator, Troy, Last Samurai, The Patriot, all of these, Kingdom of Heaven, 300, like all these random sort of historical epics from all over, like different cultures, different eras. It kind of didn't matter, but I loved that. I loved superhero movies growing up. I loved comic books, and so all this to say, like, really, I took to other worlds and
Mhm.
like being immersed in that kind of stuff. So my heroes were like Tolkien, and um I loved the cast of Lord of the Rings, like Viggo Mortensen, who played Aragorn, Ian McKellen, who played Gandalf, um, you know, uh, Russell Crowe, there are a bunch of people, they're not even necessarily my favorite actors, I feel like I have a list of my favorite actors for random reasons, but when I think of people who like actually influenced me getting involved in the first place with acting, it's like the people that were in those movies when I was like 10, 11, watching those movies in my bedroom, and like, and it's acting was just the best way to get in those worlds in my mind.
Mhm.
It was like the best idea of like, how do I get to like Middle Earth?
Yeah.
Or how do I get to, the court of King Arthur? How do I do that? Like, almost like VR style, act, go act, be an actor, because they
Put
got to
yourself
set, they
in
got
the
to design.
situation.
Yeah. What was that?
Put yourself in the situation.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like VR before VR, it's like,
Mhm.
the whole department builds the set. They put you in costume. You got to learn these skills. They fly you out to some crazy location. They ask of you all of these different things that you have to do for the sake of the story and whatever. And so, like in my mind, that was the coolest part of all of it, was the immersion into that. And that was even why I did theater too, because like theater to a degree was the same thing where you're on stage and you're kind of in this like bubble that people are watching, you know. And so the root of like what I love about acting is that it's just like getting lost in another world and doing that.
Yeah, I
Does that
kind of feel
answer
like
that?
it's
It's a long-winded it was a long-winded answer, but I hope I answered that.
no, for sure. I feel like a lot of actors kind of use acting as like escapism.
Yeah,
I've seen a lot of people, like a lot of actors who've had like really hard lives, coming up, growing up, and they get into acting to kind of just like feel like, someone else for a little while, not to have to worry about themselves, but try to portray something or fix their issues through acting. I know I
yes,
definitely did the same thing for writing. I had a lot of issues that I couldn't fix that I was like struggling with mentally and like physically that I was like, if I write about this and I write about it enough, maybe I can, come to a conclusion. And I feel
true.
like, escapism is a really like important thing in the film industry.
Yeah, 100% escapism. Yeah, I mean that's the other word I would use for what I'm talking about purely.
Exactly.
I was also a kid who, I had access to woods and stuff. I loved playing pretend in the woods and using my imagination and being in different worlds, whether I was doing it with other people or doing it by myself. And escapism is that. I loved reading fantasy novels too and video games, dude. Like I was such a video game kid. um I still love video games, and it's all escapism. It's all kind of the same thing, just different formats of different
Yeah,
mediums, the same idea of escapism.
for sure, for sure. And do you have any advice for like aspiring actors, for people who are like, like think in this act in this sense, I want you to think of like a student in your class, okay?
Yeah,
What would you say to them to try to land their first audition, or when they've landed their first audition, how to approach rejection, staying resilient in the face of rejection?
yeah. Well, I think it's kind of like when we talk about in our sessions about being open with a scene,
Mhm.
not going in with too much of an idea of what you're going to do and staying open with the choices. That's a mentality to develop, right?
Okay.
You develop that mindset when you approach a script or you approach a scene, and you try your best not to marry yourself to one choice, right? Because
Okay.
there's probably multiple choices to any one scene or any one character. That's a mentality going in. And I think the same way you develop that mentality with a script, you develop the mentality of leave it there. Once you audition for something, forget all about it. you
Mhm.
know Easier said than done, but I think over time that just becomes the norm. There's like this kind of weird like paradox where if you fall in love with the audition, you most likely won't book it.
Mhm.
And if you aren't crazy about the audition and you go anyway, you most likely are going to book that. If like there's like this weird thing that happens. So it's this idea of staying kind of neutral. You don't want to be too precious with any one thing or want it too bad. You have to preserve yourself. And
Mhm.
that comes from a mentality of I'm going to do my best with this audition, but the second I send it in, if it's a self tape,
Mhm.
like it is most of the time these days, or whatever it is, the second I leave the room, the second I'm done with my audition, I'm going to put it away and move on with my life. I'm not
Mhm.
going to
Well,
I'm not going to dwell on it. And if they call me and they tell me they want to see me again and remind me of that whole thing, then that's great, and I'll be down for that. I'll go to a callback, whatever. But if that doesn't happen, that's fine too, because I'm already looking ahead. I'm already going forward. You know what I mean? Um, Again, that's a mentality. It's easier said than done. It's a mentality to develop. It doesn't happen necessarily overnight, but I think people should tell themselves that. That was kind of instilled in me through some of the classes and the people that I worked with early on. That mentality of look forward, forget about it after it's done, don't fall in love with it. Those types of ideas. That was instilled in me early on, and I will say 100% that comes in handy. Again, it
Yeah.
goes back to self-preservation. Otherwise, you'll drive yourself crazy. You can't fall in love with every audition. It's just gonna, it hurts. It does hurt.
Mm.
Rejection is real, and it is there. So the question is, or the mission is, okay, that's gonna happen. So how can I mitigate that? How can I minimize its effects? You know what I
Mm.
mean?
For sure, for sure. And I do want to stress, like, on the writing side of things, you deal with a lot of rejection, you deal with a lot of that over your career, and especially in the beginning, especially when you're learning. My personal experiences are cover fly competitions. I'm sure you've heard of cover fly.
Yeah.
It's a really big tool for writers just getting into the industry. I honestly advise anybody to use it, any and everybody. But there's competitions once a year, or free competitions once a year. There's one of them, and I've entered every year, and I keep getting to the quarterfinals and getting eliminated. But you just buckle down and keep writing, because if you stop writing, your progression stops, your progression halts. And if you keep writing, you write every day, even if you don't like what you're writing, delete it, start again the next day, keep writing, and I feel like you'll get better and you'll get better, and just stick it out. This is what I'm trying
Mhm.
to say. I'm kind of beating around the bush here, but if you stick it out, the rejection will stop as well. You'll
Mhm.
find that one thing that kind of pushes you, that makes you want to keep pursuing it.
Mhm.
And I feel like
100%.
we all reach that point. Like, I'm sure the lifeguard and the Fosters was that for you. Um, I remember you told me a story a while back about, right before you landed the Fosters and the lifeguard, you were thinking about going back to college and getting a
Yeah.
degree.
Yeah.
Do you mind sharing that a little bit?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it was a weird time because, age wise, I was newly 18,
Mm.
and, uh, I was right there. I'd finished, obviously, I'd graduated high school, which I had to graduate high school in a weird way. I had to finish online because I was already in LA, but I was still connected to Atlanta in a weird way. So there was weird stuff going on. So I graduated high school, and I had worked a little bit. And so I felt like I was straddling. But yeah, like age wise, I was coming up to time to go to college, in some
Mhm.
way, whatever that meant. And so what are you going to do? And I had people pressuring me. I mean, I even pressure. And when I say pressure, I don't mean bad pressure. I just mean the air of that time felt like I had to make a decision essentially, and I felt like I had people who cared about me, who didn't want me to be out in the cold, and I feel like more and more of them were kind of leaning towards me going to school because they didn't want me to, like I said, they didn't want me to be out in the cold, with no real plan in place.
Mhm.
And so I kind of just I floated on that, and before I was really really stressed. I was
Mhm.
really it very much felt like a fork in the road for me, and uh it was one of those moments too, man, where like I really had to like choose to believe in like what I loved.
Mhm.
And I did have this very very underdeveloped idea of going to Pasadena Community College for screenwriting,
Mhm.
and that was potentially going to be my move. But like I said, it was very underdeveloped because at that time I was so all in with acting, really really all in with acting at that point. um and so it was just really tough to see me going to school. Like that was really what it was. Like I couldn't see it in my mind. Like I just kept auditioning, and I was in LA, and I got this audition for the lifeguard, which was this little indie. Ended up going to Sundance in 2013. And that was an example of an audition. I went in, I think I got there late. Like I didn't want to go. I think I was stressing about the school stuff. I don't remember exactly, but I remember the audition process with that. It was kind of weird. And then I booked it, and found myself, I traveled for that job. That was in the summer of 2012.
Mhm.
And after that job, I got back from, so that job kind of, I was gone for a month. And so while I did that, I kind of mentally put the whole school thing away for a little bit. Like I
Mhm.
just wasn't really worrying about that. I was just focusing on the job. So I was out there for the summer, and then I come back to LA, and now it's approaching fall, and I think it's like I have to decide by like next year or something like that. So I
Mhm.
have like the rest of the year or something to decide. And yeah, man, I got the audition for a pilot called The Fosters in the fall of that year, and then we shot the pilot the end of 2012. Like I think we were shooting it in November or something of 2012, and it was still just a pilot back then. And
Yeah.
this was still where that mattered, where we didn't have for sure if we were going to go for like a whole season yet. That wasn't how it worked yet. So we just shot the pilot, and then shortly, I think literally by January of the following years, literally like right after New Year's, so it wasn't even any time for me to like do anything. I knew that we were going to go back, that the Fosters had gotten picked up by ABC Family at the time, which then became Freeform. Um, and that was it, man. So it was really like, I think when I look back at that time, it was sort of a time where I stuck to my guns in terms of my bliss, in terms of my passions, in terms of my dreams. And also I had invested a lot of time in that. And I felt like it wasn't my time to go down this other route with school and stuff. I had other things to do. And I can't tell you that I knew that consciously, but I knew that somehow unconsciously. And then my answers came like pretty shortly after that. My answers came, and then I was doing the Fosters for the next 5 years.
Yeah.
So um that's kind of how that went, and it taught me a lot, man. Like it taught me a lot about kind of, I guess, conviction in the sense of what do you really want to do,
Mhm.
and how far are you willing to go to make that happen, even if you're got to be in a hot seat or like face those forks, in the
Yeah.
road. um and all this time later, I'm really happy that I made that decision and I went that route, because I just know without a doubt now, I'm 30 now, um that I'm meant for this industry, that I'm
Yeah.
meant to, but I belong in this industry, whether it's acting or some other way, but I belong in this industry. So I felt I felt like I made the right choice, and
Yeah.
I stand by it, you know?
Yeah. And in my opinion, I see that passion. I see that you want to pursue your dreams at all costs, but I also see the practicality in your mindset about everyone. It's kind of just when you grow up, everyone's talking to you. It's kind of like the next move, college.
Mm-hmm.
You know, for creatives, I feel like it's kind of like either they'll just tuck their dreams away and never look at them again, or the other half is kind of like altitude sickness, like when you're climbing Mount Everest.
Yeah,
Just a few more feet, just a few more feet, and they'll end up giving up everything, go all or nothing to pursue a dream. And sometimes it works, sometimes it pans out, but there's also is a possibility that that'll never happen. And that's
totally.
something as creatives that everyone has to grasp. Everyone who's pursuing their dreams has to grasp at some point.
Yeah, yeah. And I think also I can only speak to this when it comes to creatives, as being a creative, but one thing I had to also realize about anything I create, because I write music, I
Mm.
write stories, whatever, you know, whatever I feel like creating.
Yeah.
I like to cook. I'm creating meals all the time. You know, uh, you have to want to do it when no one's looking. You
Yeah.
know, like if you're writing a movie, write the movie because you want to write the movie and you see the movie in your mind and you want
Mhm.
that thing to exist in some form outside of yourself. If it becomes something bigger, like a real movie,
Mhm.
then that's great, but that's also kind of another creation, you know, because that'll bring in more people. It'll become something else, and eventually it'll be the public's. It'll be
Mhm.
theirs to enjoy and watch, and that's the goal. The goal is the contribution to society. We give them the stories, but before that, there should be this decision to want to make the thing for the sake of making the
Yeah.
thing, not because it's going to blow you up, not
Mhm.
because you're going to get famous, not because you're going to make a lot of money off of it, though those are nice byproducts, maybe. The money, is nice. You want to be financially stable, but you should want to make the thing because it's nice to make the thing, because you feel compelled to make the thing, not because if you make the thing and it goes well, you're set.
Yeah.
That's different mentality. And I don't, you know, I'm not judging either one. I
Hmm.
just feel like if you want to preserve yourself and maybe feel more at peace with like your creations and that kind of thing, make them for you and
Yeah.
allow that inward desire to propel it perhaps outward,
Yeah, for
if
sure.
that makes
I,
sense.
I totally agree. I totally agree that you're when you're writing a film or if you're acting in a film, your end game should not be money or fame. Your end game
Right.
should be making the project that you want to put out, putting your heart and soul into something for the sole purpose of making it, the
Yes.
sole purpose of putting that out and having people relate to that, feel that.
Yep.
um, I'm a big drama writer. Like most of my scripts I write are dramas. And it's because I remember times where I needed to feel something. And instead of, relapsing or, going back into that scene, I would just turn on something really sad or really heartfelt. And it would help me get through those times.
Yeah.
And that's kind of my dream for everything. It's not to be rich or famous or it's to be able to put out projects that someone in my position 3 years ago, 4 years ago could go and watch and
Yeah.
feel something without the help of any substances.
Yeah. And that's a beautiful thing. That's a beautiful channeling, that can definitely take place with stories. We inherently tell ourselves stories.
Mm.
We are living our own stories right now. We're naturally storytellers and kind of view the world as such. you know um and there's a lot of ways to look at all the stories that we tell ourselves, but beyond what those stories may be, they're stories. And the best thing, I feel like one of the best things to do as an artist, a writer for sure, but also an actor, maybe all art really is live and
Mhm.
observe, and be honest, you know, um, and record, not with your phone, but with absorb what happens in life and then turn around and maybe pour some of that into a story, because what ends up happening is you end up with something that you can flip on and feel something, you know. It doesn't have to all be spectacle. And I think that's like one thing we've gotten a little bit away from in this day and age is there's many movies are spectacles. Many movies you might as well put on some 3D glasses and some misters so you can feel some water. And like the movies have gotten so crazy that they're like Shrek 3D at Universal Studios or whatever. It's like you might as well do that with a lot of these movies these days, and it's fine. There's always a place for spectacle, but spectacle isn't the only way to enjoy a movie. And movies have been around for a long time, way before they were spectacles, way before they were $200 million CGI things. They were meant to be ways that the public could relate or feel like they're being seen or feel like they're being heard, or to go and commiserate together with the character that's going through his or her own misery. It's a time to see us ourselves, you know,
Mhm.
identify ourselves in the thing. Um, and again, there's nothing wrong with spectacle. It's just
Yeah.
that's not the only type of movie or story and to your point about feeling something and flipping something on, as opposed to going down other paths of feeling, right? Or
Yeah.
whatever that may be, desire to feel something. Yeah, you can choose to make it a communal experience by putting on a movie. And even if you watch a movie alone, it's still kind of communal because there's all the people involved in the story that they're telling you. So there's this weird kind of, it's a human thing, of feeling seen, kind of like I guess a mirror in a sense.
Yeah, for sure. 100%. It's So it's kind of a beautiful thing, man. And honestly, like in my opinion, this is definitely probably will catch a lot of flack, but I think the best times in film were like the early 2000s or like the indie films, like because I felt like they were so raw and natural and like untouched by like big corporate need for make to make money. It's not Star Wars 18 or
Yeah.
like, you know what I'm saying? It's just this story getting told, this original story being told from somebody who probably doesn't care about the money, who wants to put out something that is just a passion for them, you know?
Yep. Yep. Yeah, no, the indie movie world scene, the festival movie world scene is a fantastic one and it should exist, but it's been suffering for a long time now. I mean, the the diversion of funds to those bigger movies, those studio movies just take over everything. There's no room for a movie that costs like 2.5 million to make as opposed to like 100 million or whatever big studio movie, because of the returns, because of the sales, because of the profits included. You don't really make much money off those indie movies, even though they're great movies, they're beautiful movies. Um, they're relatively easy to make and they don't take long to make either. So like there's some pros to that too. But yeah, no, people just don't want to take chances on that, and I think it's really just the returns. They just don't make it. It's unfortunately the film industry, the business side of things, really gets involved with the decisions. Hopefully there's some sort of swing of the pendulum, and maybe those movies return in some way. I think people are tired of Marvel movies, at least for right now, or things that feel that way.
Yeah.
So that's good. So we'll
Yeah.
see what's next. But you always have to adapt, always have to evolve.
Mhm. And I feel like we're definitely in the era of reboots right now, you know?
Right.
Um, not a personal fan of it. I mean, I feel like they're not going in with the heart and soul that the original project had. You know, they're going in with money mentality, and I feel like it's ruining a lot of these things that could be great. Like off the top of the dome, How I Met Your Mother, they just had a spinoff a couple years
Mhm.
back, How I Met Your Father, and a lot of people I was watching just like reviews and stuff, everyone hated this. Like,
Yeah.
and I feel like it didn't have the soul that everyone was looking for that they found in the first one.
Yeah.
And I honestly, there's some reboots that absolutely kill it, some that hit it right on the nose, but I feel like a lot of it is just soulless remakes to try to cash in. And I feel like the the cashing in, or like, I'm sorry, the monetary gain is just it's like putting a damper on the creative and the absolute beauty of storytelling, you know?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. 100%. 100%. Yeah. I mean, it's a balance because it is a business, but yeah, 100%. I think there is an imbalance. And I mean, right now, just now, like this year, it's starting to feel like there's a little bit more originality coming out and a little bit more randomness, which I think is good. Like I think they just need to start taking more chances, and more maybe independent filmmakers. Independent meaning, they just come in with their ideas and very specific ideas of what they want to make. Those types of guys or gals that come in and have a real clear idea, like we just need more of those types to come in, and they will, once we see that there's a void of stuff. That's why I think it's so cool to see like Viggo Mortensen. I mentioned him earlier. He directed something, came out with a Western not too long ago. Dev Patel did Monkey Man. You have a few actors actually now kind of getting involved with the directing and writing of things just to get things off the ground and create new original vehicles for themselves. You have Jordan Peele doing his thing with Monkey Paw Productions. So like there's like cool little like stuff, and there's way more than that. Like those are just
Yeah.
things that come to my mind.
Um,
But there's way more originality and camps out there that are doing cool things, and so like I think as time goes on and we get away from maybe like some of these franchisee stuff things, a little bit, because I think the audience is kind of tired of that look, that maybe we can get to some interesting other places.
And do you feel like in the world of a successful project, whether it be a show or movie, I honestly I'm super curious myself. Do you think it's really important for like the actors to have a good chemistry, not like on screen, but off screen, like a good rapport with each other? Like, do you feel like a film is more successful or a show is more successful when the actors get along behind the scenes?
Yeah, I mean, I think casts, no matter what it is, honestly, even if it's a stage production, like there are ways to have a professional relationship, so you don't need to be best friends with everybody.
Mhm.
Um, but you do need to have some sort of connection, if you will. Like I feel like most actors at least to have they at least need to have like one little conversation or something, just to kind of get some sort of energy connection. But with that said, there's been plenty of famous examples of people who hated each other on set and made a great thing.
Mhm.
Even with them having to play lovers or having to play best friends or whatever the case may be. So I don't know. I mean, I think in my experience, with theater and the stuff I've been in, like on camera,
Mhm.
um, for the most part, everyone had a great relationship.
Yeah.
And even if there were certain situations where people didn't necessarily get along personally, or even it's not even like they were fighting or anything, but just like weren't people who would ever hang out outside of
Yeah,
set. You know what I mean? Like that kind of thing.
for sure.
So sometimes you'll run into that, but the professional relationship always comes in too. I mean, we are professionals, actors are
Yeah.
professionals, and there are certain ways to handle a set where you don't need to be buddy buddy with people. I
Mhm.
mean, a lot of actors go and they need their own time. So most actors are actually not most, but a lot of actors they retreat, they go away. If they're not needed, they hide, and when they're needed again, they're brought back.
Yeah.
So that a lot of that happens too, or they're reading, or they're taking time to them because it's a lot of focus. It's kind of a really social job, um, weird hours, and so in a lot of cases, people kind of do their own thing a lot,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
then maybe you'll have a little conversation with them right before you do something together, and then you might go another 6 hours before you see them again, and so it's like it kind of depends. I've always had good relationships with everyone I've had to work with. I've been lucky in that regard, and I think even the sets in general that I've been on so far have all been really great, gracious sets, and everyone's gotten along, not just the cast, but like the crew. Because really, like you actually you're interacting more with the crew, even I would say, than the cast in a lot of ways. So like those become more your buddies, really, because they're
Mhm.
they're the people that you're working with even closer than cast sometimes.
Yeah.
So I'd say there are a lot of different relationships on set that are healthy and can create a good thing. And it doesn't
Mhm.
mean that everyone has to be like this big family by the end, even though that's nice and it sounds, it's kind of like this romanticized kind of thing. And I think in some cases it happens. It just
Mhm.
isn't, it's not necessary for it to happen.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
Yeah.
Um, I totally agree. Like, I don't know from like from like I've never acted in anything with anyone, so I can't really like say I fully like understand. But I agree. I've seen a lot of like articles and shit after the process of progress of a show. The show's already done, and for example, Community with Chevy Chase. Before he left the show, it just seemed normal. It just seemed like these guys were all friends in real life, and then you see Joel McHale come out and like a podcast talking about how much he fucking hates Chevy Chase and
Right.
how much of a dick that guy was. And I feel like there's a little bit to throw at each side,
Yeah.
like you said, the professional aspect, and there's also where, this cast and crew are just best friends.
Yeah.
They keep up with
Yeah.
each other and stay in each other's lives. But I feel like it all helps to get us audience involved when they're seeing like YouTube videos of these actors hanging out outside of work, but it
Yeah.
also, it seems kind of parasocial in a way as well. Like,
Yeah.
something I'm sure you've noticed in your career is people hating on David Lambert because of something that Brandon did in the show.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
So you know what? I don't know how to like. I feel like that's it's a double edged sword. You know.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you're asking like how does that feel when someone does that?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Um yeah, I mean, it is what it is. Like, I mean, I guess, it's funny because in most cases, like I agree with them, but it's not like, I mean, the stars of shows don't write their own storylines, you know. Writers do, and I love writing, and but I wasn't even in the, you're not even in the writing room ever, like
Mhm.
you're given the script, you go to the table read, you hear it out loud, and then the following week you're shooting it. That's how it goes. That's,
Yeah,
you're finishing one episode, and then towards the end of that shoot, they give you the next episode. You go do the table read, you find out, just like with everyone else, you find out what you're doing in that episode at the table read. You're like,
mhm.
oh, okay, I guess I'm doing this now. Okay.
Yeah,
And then you do it next week. So there's no discussion, it's not like they gave me multiple choice of like, what do you want Brandon to do next?
yeah, exactly.
That'd be interesting if that's how it works, but that's not how it works, so um yeah, I was frustrated with some choices he made. I mean, for me, look, if you're going to give someone frustrating decisions or decisions that are detrimental, give him a redemption, give him an arc, give him chances to learn. And I think he did, but then he would get caught in cycles, and there were plenty of frustrating elements to Brandon. So I understand
Yeah,
the heat, I guess for me, it's like it's I'll take it as a compliment because it just means that they think I'm him, which
yeah,
is, cool. It's cool that they think I'm Brandon. So, and I'm sure, people when they interact with people that they've spent X amount of time watching on TV, there's the immediate projection of those memories of those times of watching it. You don't know what was going on in their life when they were watching that show or whatever, or what that show is tied to, so, and you're a part of that,
yeah.
and so um I just honor it. Brandon was what Brandon was, and I played that. So it is. I wear it all with pride. It is what it is. That was
For
the
sure,
character.
for
You know.
sure. And I feel like that's kind of part of the beauty of intricate storytelling is a lot of people get mad at the actors for the characters they play, for the characters' actions. But the thing is, that's a drama. That's
Right.
part of a drama is drama.
Yeah.
So if this character, something a guy told me, he's an industry executive. He said, and a lot of early writers make this mistake, like I did. He said, "You're writing this story like all the characters are agree with each other on everything and they're just best friends and they don't ever have any agreements." And he's like, what's the fun in that? Where's the things that bring out the true personality of these characters?
Sure. Sure.
And I feel like if a character doesn't make a bad decision once in a while or do something stupid, then they're never really growing. They're staying stagnant and it's just unrealistic.
Right. Well, that's what drama is, right? Drama is a rift in the piece. You know, it's the hiccup. That's where the drama begins. You know.
Yeah,
So you need the mistakes, and you need those things that happen with characters and whatever the story may be. Like maybe in the future, if I'm writing a character and I'm also playing that character and people don't like what I do, and then they can get mad at me because I decided for that character to do that thing, because I wrote it as well. So that's a different conversation,
yeah,
but yeah, no, yeah, we are at the whim of whatever the writing staff decides to do. And they were great. I mean, it's a really interesting process to write for an ensemble show like The Fosters, because you had 8 leads, you had the whole family, and then you had all of the characters surrounding them. And the methods of which they would kind of do that was they had a whole whiteboard that wrapped around their like 3 walls of the writing room. It was like whiteboard, 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 and it wrapped around like that. And on that whiteboard, they had like color coded sticky notes, and then they also
Hmm.
had color coded marker columns, and they were all each color correlated to a character.
Hmm.
And I forget how many writers we even had. I think we had 6 to 8 writers or something like that. And so each of these writers or pairs of these writers would be sort of tasked to be voices for one of these characters, or multiple characters. So it was a really interesting process of like how they went about to do how they go about doing that. It's a whole other world. You know.
For sure, for sure. And something I did want to talk about for sure is ethical storytelling.
Mm.
For example, your film, the film you were in, The Lifeguard, had some of the most like mixed reviews. Like people, a lot of people thought it was one of the greatest films ever, and then you have these other people who are like, "What the fuck is this?" This is terrible. But
Yeah.
like, I think that that's like one of those really big things is to talk about like the ethical play in film, like how Kristen Bell in the movie was, partaking in this disgusting underage relationship. But like there, a lot of people aren't recognizing the storytelling.
Yeah. Yeah.
The because like I kind of see what everyone was going for in the film. Like this coming of age story kind of, but also showing how a midlife crisis can affect the people around you.
Right. Right. Right.
And you know, what do you think about the ethics and storytelling? How you have to like bend the narrative a little bit, make it you know what I'm saying? Like, shoot.
I do. Yeah. No. 100%. Yeah. Like make it palatable to the audience or whatever. Make it acceptable. Or what is acceptable. Yeah. For me, I play with that all the time because I think a little bit of that is where the world is at any given moment. Because like I don't think Lifeguard would necessarily get made today.
Mm,
Well, it wouldn't get made today for a few different reasons.
mm,
One, I think that movie cost 2.5 million to make, so it's right, and it's like a Sundance movie, so it's like right in that ballpark of movies that just aren't made anymore. Like the
mm,
budget and everything. For the most part, I mean, maybe streaming is starting to pick up the slack for that and put more random indies together like that. Maybe I don't really know, but and I know there's an indie market, by the way. Like there is still an indie market. It's just not. I feel like it's not as streamlined as it used to be, like in 2012, 2013, or even before that, like
mm.
2011, 2010. Those years were like I feel like way more prime for like Sundance and South by Southwest and TIFF and all of those. Anyway, uh, going back to your question, I think it really depends on where the world is. That's the first thing. The second thing is how strongly do I feel about the story, um, or some aspect of the shoot. Like for me, I guess in general, like for me, I need it. I need to be excited about something and feel like I'm going in learning something or whatever that may be. Like I don't really want to just take a job for the sake of taking a job. There has to be like another thing there, and for me with Lifeguard, I was younger. I was 19. So um or yeah, I was turning 19.
Mm.
I'm forgetting. Um Either 18 or 19. But for me at that point, it was all about learning, and it was all about like being in over my head on a shoot where I was surrounded by people who were like way more experienced than me and me having to keep up. That was how I
Mm.
looked at that. And I was like, okay, yeah, that's definitely what I should do. Like, I don't know if I can do that. That's exactly why I should do it.
Yeah.
So that was like my reasoning for doing Lifeguard. But yeah, like it was a super weird shoot because of the intimacy and all the different things that we had to do, and that was like really, really intimidating for me. It wasn't necessarily as fun as maybe some people would joke about. It was more of like an intimidating mission for me to have to, like I said though, like literally the mentality was like I just have to keep up with these guys. I got to keep up with
Mm.
like Chris Bell and Martin Starr, and Mamie Gummer was in there too, one of Meryl Streep's daughters, and she was awesome. And even Josh Harto, who played Mamie's husband in that, and he's only in a few scenes, but he was also an incredible actor.
Yeah.
Everyone in that movie was like so solid, and I was so happy to just be like playing with all of them. It was crazy.
Mhm.
So that was my justification for that, you know. But I think it's really case to case. It's hard to like, I don't know if there's any sort of like umbrella statement or mentality or outlook other than what I said before, which is I look for the experiences, or I'm going to learn something new, like a new skill, you know, like, oh, I got to do archery for this. That's cool. So I'll learn art, you know, like some life skill would be an interesting thing to go in for, you know. It's just got to hook me in some way, and then I'll and the story too, you know, that obviously like it just has to speak to me in some way, but it's very case to case because movies, it's so hard to it's so hard to sit here and say like um what is acceptable in a movie and what isn't. There's obviously the givens that are, you know, we can say what is obviously unacceptable in a movie, but then there's like other things that like maybe on paper it's like, no, I would never watch that in a movie, and then you put on some movie and they do it in some way and you're like, I never thought I would have watched
Like
that,
them.
but you know. And yeah, and so it's like there's plenty of examples that I can't think of right now that are basically that, you know. And I think a good movie proves you wrong in a way. So um there's also that to consider, you know. There are plenty of movies that were made where everyone who showed up really thought it was going to be great. You know what I mean? I think in most cases that's the case, you know. And so when a movie like completely tanks, it's probably lost in the translation, you know, or it was helmed wrong, directed wrong, you know, the leadership was not there, whatever the case may be. The vision wasn't there, you know, but there are always attempts at something great, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I
And
think for the most part.
I feel like the imperfections is what makes these things beautiful. And like
Yeah,
even the worst of movies can still have an effect on somebody. Can still,
yeah,
like art is very subjective. I feel like a lot of people like movies that other people hate, or there's movies
yeah,
that I love that everyone in the world seems to dislike. I think that's just the
exactly.
beauty of art in general.
Yeah, there are some movies out there that are really honestly disturbing movies that people love, you know. It just depends on what you're into, man, you know. And that's why it's hard for me to be like, yeah, I mean, you know, there's definitely a question of ethics, you know, but um it's hard, it's subjective, like you said. So it's really hard to know. It's case to case. I think read the script, and if you're in the position of like, do I do this or not, just read the script, and if it speaks to you in some way, then I think take the gamble. I think it's always worth it, you know. You know, but learning too, I always go back to like, I just want to be in the position of learning and absorbing and being exposed to things that maybe I haven't been before. And so like those sets are always, I think, the best sets, you know.
100%. 100%. Well, I think we're starting to run out of time here, but I really appreciate you coming on, David. And it was a blast. And I think that a lot of people have stories to tell. A lot of people
Yes.
who don't exactly realize it yet, or like think that this would be too hard or too far fetched. I think they just need to get out here and do it. I think that everybody who wants to do it can do it to any degree. They just need to be able to put the dedication and the time in and deal with rejection. Like we talked about, deal with how everyone's not always going to like their decisions or their movies, but you just got to keep pushing, and someday something will stick.
100%, man. 100%. It is about managing that time, making time for those things to happen, you know, and for you to sit with yourself and decide on what it is that moves you, you know, and what it is that um feels like your bliss, you know.
Yeah,
Follow your bliss. That's what I believe. You know,
100%.
follow what it is that makes you feel alive, and make time for that. I know it's tough. This day and age is tough with bills and everything. It really, really is. I mean, I feel it too. You know, so this is not just me glossing over and saying those things. It is true. Um, and so, but we always make time for the things we got to make time for, and making time for our passions, our real passions, like that's important too. So we have to budget that in, you know, and prioritize that a little bit. Um, and yeah,